This is the KRMG Afternoon News with Skylar Cooper.
Breakdown. Go ahead, give it to me.
It's time for the BA Breakdown on the KRMG Afternoon News. We do this every Tuesday at 5:05. We check in live with Broken Arrow City Manager Michael Spurgeon. Michael, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my friend. Hope your week has started off well.
It's going very well. This weather alone puts me in a good mood, just being outside.
Yes.
Hey, we found out last Friday, so it was after our last conversation, that a former officer, his name's Roy Golden, had resigned from Broken Arrow Police. He's the officer, just to catch people up, who had been seen pepper spraying a dog. He was then accused of tasing it. So, Michael, I know the criminal portion of this whole thing is still ongoing in Wagner County, and you can't speak to that, I understand. But as for the resignation from the police force, I believe that falls a little more under your purview. So the chief said that Mr. Golden had resigned a day before a hearing was to be held regarding disciplinary action. Can you get us up to speed on what happened with all of that?
Sure. I'm glad you're bringing this up because first thing I want to do is that, this is a very difficult situation and the circumstances and the actions certainly don't reflect upon what the city of Broken Arrow and our organization find acceptable. So, keeping that in mind, the first thing I want to say is Officer Golden was a member of the collective bargaining agreement with the FOP. And so therefore the city has a responsibility to follow the guidelines and the provisions in the collective bargaining agreement and our personnel policy. And a part of that includes doing the investigation, the internal investigation that was done, by the police department. And once that's complete, we're required to provide the findings of that investigation to the employee so they can be prepared for the upcoming predetermination hearing. And that's what happened. He saw the results of the investigations, and I don't know what was in his mindset, but based on what was in the investigation, and when we let somebody know there's going to be a predetermination, we have to tell them what the potential consequences could be with regard to discipline, which in this case was up to termination. And I believe that he made the decision to resign rather than go through the predetermination process.
Okay, last time you and I talked, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we said that we heard from you that the internal investigation was essentially paused while the criminal proceedings were going on. Was that still the case here?
Well, actually, the criminal case, as you mentioned early on, is still going on. But from my perspective as city manager, we had a person that was on administrative leave and had been since essentially the day of the incident. And I wanted to proceed and spoke to the chief. We decided to go ahead and move forward with the internal investigation and complete that. And so, like you said, that's still out there and will be decided, through the courts. But with regard to the personnel matter, I believed that needed to go forward, and the chief completed it. And once they completed it, they started that process. If in fact the employee would have gone through the process, then the predetermination hearing would have been held, and then there would have been a recommendation to my office on what discipline, if any, to take.
I think you answered this, but my next question was, had he been on administrative leave the entire time since September? Did he ever go back to work?
No, he actually didn't go back to work. And once again, he self-reported the day of the incident, as I understand, and was on administrative leave the entire time. He did not go back on work. And, once again, my position is whenever you're dealing with employees, you put them off work so you can complete the investigation. And this was longer than normal, but I felt like it was the right thing to do and it would give us time to go through this internal investigation process. Plus, we were asked by the district attorney to pause things a couple of times, and which we did to honor that. But at this point, I just felt like we needed to go forward and complete this process and move forward and complete the investigation and see where that would lead.
So it sounds like he may have known what was coming and decided to just get out of there before maybe being fired, possibly, which you said might have been an option. Is it possible down the road that if he's cleared in Wagner County, would he be eligible for rehire? Is that something that the PD could consider?
For the city of Broken Arrow?
Right.
Well, actually, if considering there was an investigation out there, I don't believe that he would be eligible for rehire, but I'd have to speak to HR and speak to the chief of police. I believe we'd have to complete that process. All right. Because once again, you've got the court process, but you also have the results of the internal investigation.
Right. All right, Michael, thank you so much. We're talking with Broken Arrow City Manager Michael Spurgeon. Wanted to get that all caught up. While we're talking about pets, I just read that you no longer need to have a license to own a cat or a dog in Broken Arrow. And let me just say, I've apparently been breaking that law for a few years. I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, yes. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, some towns they're very strict about it, and we had it on the books. And after a great deal of discussion and debate, the council decided that no longer need a permit to have a dog or cat here in the city, because it just, with the size of our community, it really comes down to it's extremely difficult to enforce that ordinance.
But if I want
not something the council wanted to.
If I want an iguana or a snake, do I still have to have a license for that?
Well, I think we have an ordinance on exotic animals. I can't quote it right now, but I do believe we have that. And so if someone wanted to own an exotic animal, I mean, there's regulations and that they'd have to follow to be able to do so.
Back on the police department for a second before we go. I
Sure.
think there's an event coming up, the Human Trafficking Forum with BAPD. What's that all about?
Oh my gosh, I was hoping that you would bring this up really soon, especially before the upcoming meeting that Chief Berryhill, and I applaud him for his efforts here, on March 4th at Central on Main. There's going to be a conversation, is what I'll call it, is that Chief Berryhill and his team, as well as city officials, they want to raise awareness on this important issue of human trafficking. I mean, a lot of times we think, or we envision human trafficking, I mean, what we see at the movies, when reality is it looks different in a suburban community that may look around the world or other parts of our country. And so the Chief Berryhill wants to sit down and have a conversation with the parents or those interested parties about what that looks like, what parents need to know, what they need to focus on to make sure that they keep their children safe. And so this is something that I think we want to be a leader on, to make sure that we're being proactive, because that's much better. The proactive is much better than the cure. So we're going to start that conversation and see how it goes. And I think he has other awareness activities he's planning throughout the year. But he and I talked last fall, and we're going to make this a priority in Broken Arrow, because we just want to make sure folks knows what it looks like so they can be aware of it.
That's coming up again March 4th. We'll remind folks before we get there as well. Michael Spurgeon, the city manager in Broken Arrow, thanks so much.
You got it. Have a good week.